Hey there, this is Natalie. And what do you mean? My hair's always been blue. Welcome to a special Reddit story video where I'm going to be looking at some interesting, supposedly true life stories from Reddit users who have experienced things which cannot be explained. I'm planning to do these semi-regularly as an addition to the more normal Reddit story videos, so please subscribe if you like spooky, paranormal, or glitch in the matrix type stories. Now, let's get started. This story comes from r/glitch in the matrix, and it was originally posted by user Odorous Rex. The title of the story is The Day the World Shifted. And it's a golden oldie from 11 years ago. OP begins. I recently discovered this subreddit via subreddit of the day and was enthralled by all of these stories. It reminded me of something that happened to me long ago, something that always stays slightly at the back of my mind. I never thought of it as a glitch in the matrix, but this fits so well. The memories of it are still vivid to this day, even though I'd also written it all down in my journal a couple of weeks after I got home, that I've used as a refresher for writing this up. I was 16 and a typical teenage boy. It was the summer of 1993. My parents had sent me to Outward Bound, a month in the outdoors with other troubled teens, pushing our limits, making us learn trust, etc. In reality, hiking 10 miles a day with 40 to 60 pounds on your back in the middle of nowhere, with other misfits, just trying to get through it and back to our lives. We were in the Three Sisters wilderness of the Oregon backcountry, beautiful land. We were about 2 weeks into our month-long trip. I became close with a girl named Ava in my group, of about 10 girls and boys, with 3 guides, 1 guy, 2 women, and she was from Sweden. I'd been to Sweden a couple of years earlier, and we were able to talk about places I visited that she knew. I'll never forget her. I was completely crushed on her. Beautiful blonde with green eyes, tan for a Swede. The night before this incident, she and I kissed, and we made out a little, out off by where we camped. We got caught by one of the guides/counsellors and told that relationships, and especially segs, were not allowed. Something they drilled into us from day one. No drugs, no alcohol, no intimacy. We were just kissing somewhat innocently. I'd also been friends with a guy named Steve. He's got blisters on his ankle the first week, and it got quite infected. The guides wanted him to drop out, go to a doctor, but he soldiered on. We kept it clean and bandaged, and even though he had a noticeable limp, he managed to keep up with all of us just fine. He talked the guides into thinking it was no big deal, and he stayed. He had amazing willpower, and I kind of looked up to him. He was almost always our group leader. Now came the weird part, the part where everything changed for me. We were taking a lunch break alongside a gorgeous crystal blue, glacial-fed pool. There was a minor waterfall, maybe 10 feet, from the stream above feeding it. The water was deep, but absolutely crystal clear and blue, and cold, very refreshing after a hot summer hike. You could see the soft gravel bottom. 5 large boulders stood in a perfect circle on the bottom, as if set there by someone. Completely submerged, they were perfectly equidistant from each other. Someone quickly noted that there was just enough room in the centre to dive off the waterfall and swim down to the gravelly, beautiful bottom. A couple of the other kids, including Steve with his injured foot, went and dove. I, of course, wanted to impress Ava, and she said it looked fun, but that she was too scared to do it. She said she would try it if I did it. My teen ego immediately rose to the challenge. I climbed up the wet rocks next to the waterfall to the top. I remember looking down at the beautiful crystal blue water, the light filtering through the forest leaves, Ava looking and smiling up at me. It was just a perfect, beautiful day. I jumped. The next thing I know, I'm on the side of the pool coughing up water with 2 extremely concerned guides nursing over me, and a massive headache. They're telling me I hit my head on one of the boulders. I'm lucky I'm not dead. Steve is nowhere around. Ava doesn't look a mote concerned. She's off gossiping with one of the other girls. A couple of the other kids are with me, and the male guide helps me up. The waterfall is there, but the pool is now a murky green-brown. You can barely see the boulders on the bottom. I think I just must have stirred some dirt or something up in the waterfall above that fell in. I wasn't thinking clearly. I seem okay. The back of my head hurts, although my forehead is the part that has a minor cut. The third guide, the leader, comes up at this point and makes me do some tests. What year is it? Who's the president? What's my name? Etc. It's 1993. Clinton is the new president. All is right with the world. We take an extra long lunch just to make sure I'm okay. The guides decide I probably just have a minor concussion. They should keep me up all night just to be safe. They decide we're going to hike to a closer alternate camp since I might be concussed. If things get worse, they'll call the rangers. I didn't notice until later, but Steve wasn't with us. Ava seemed decidedly standoffish, but I didn't get much of a chance to talk to her. The guides wanted to keep me behind them, one in the back, two in the front. At camp that night, I notice Steve is missing. I freak out thinking we've left him and tell the guides. The guides quickly calm me down. They tell me that Steve hasn't been with us for 4 days. When his foot got infected, they called the rangers and the rangers took him to town. He could barely walk, and now he's out of the program and has been sent home. That made no sense to me. I could have sworn he was with us. I remember all 4 days of him hiking with us and his foot getting progressively better every day. I didn't say anything else. I didn't want them thinking I was crazy. I figured because of my head I misremembered, although it was also clear. I remembered talking to him at lunch. That night it got weirder. The guides were going to take shifts staying up with me. I asked Ava if she would stay up with me a little bit. She looked at me like I was crazy. And her accent was different. She just laughed at me. The male guide noticed, and he said to me that I was one hell of a persistent guy. We talked. He said I'd been after Ava this whole time, and I really should give it up. He was nice about it, but it got through to me that I was being a creep, or at least he thought so. I didn't understand. And he said it wouldn't work anyway. When she gets back to Brazil, you'll never see her again anyway. Brazil, not Sweden. Brazil. Ava was from Brazil. This was not true. I thought I must have taken a bigger hit on the head than expected. I just stayed quiet from that moment on. I was so confused. I stayed up all night thinking of things, and in the morning, I felt just fine. The rest of the trip was uneventful, but everything seemed suddenly slightly different for me from that day on. I've never understood exactly what happened. I suppose it's just the head injury. That makes sense, but some part of me just doesn't believe it. My world shifted that day. The memories before that moment are as clear and as easy to recall as what I had for breakfast this morning, or my wife's face. Even after I got back, my parents seemed different. They kept telling me what a changed and different person I was. Outward bound is supposed to change you, just not, I guess, like that. The whole world seemed different. Computers seemed better overnight. Like I didn't remember having such a cool computer, just a crappy one. Everything seemed different. Video games were more popular and better. The rest of high school I felt like an outsider. I'd always fit in before. But as the years passed, I've grown used to it and grown back into my old or new self. Even though I have a rational explanation, my head injury, I've always doubted. I wonder if the Matrix reprogrammed itself, or I switched consciousness with an alternate me, or somehow, through some fluke of the universe, I slipped through into a universe almost, but not quite, the same as the one I came from. I'm in my late 30s now, happily married, and I still think about that day and that crystal blue pool. Wow, so what do you guys think about this one? Do you really think it was just the result of a mild concussion? Perhaps giving him false memories about people like Steve and Ava? Or do you think there's a chance that maybe he did slip into another reality? Let me know in the comments, and also please let me know if you've ever had an experience similar to this one yourself. This is a story from r/glitch in the matrix from user ZJU12, and it's entitled "Still Freaks Me Out to This Day, and I've never told anyone this except my girlfriend." And OP begins. So I guess a little context is in order. My girlfriend and I had been together about a year at the time. Never had big problems. We're both pretty relaxed people. Never had a big fight, never had trust issues, the whole shenanigan. So one day I was out in front of my apartment building smoking a cigarette. This was before we lived together. I'd seen her the night before, had a nice dinner, gone out to a bar, then gone to my place, after which she took a taxi home. So as I'm standing out in front of my apartment building, she pulls up in a taxi. I wasn't expecting her and was pleasantly surprised to see her. I put out my cigarette, smiled, and walked up saying something like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" in a very friendly way. She scowls at me and slaps me square across the jaw. Obviously, I'm dumbfounded and at a loss for words, so I just kind of looked at her. She never said anything, just barged past me into the building. I followed her up to my apartment, asking her what was happening the whole way. She goes into my apartment, grabs her bag and some of her stuff that she left there, throws a few things at me, breaking a glass or two and knocking down a bunch of stuff on a shelf. She calls me a pig, says she knows everything and that I've broken her heart. I'm trying to figure out what's going on, obviously, and she stops on her way out when I touch her sleeve, glares at me again and slaps me. She tells me something like, "I hope I never see you again," and walks out. I followed her to the street and she got in her cab and drove off. The street was pretty empty. This was maybe 8 to 9 a.m. and I watch her drive off. At this point, I'm just lost for words, scared and sad. Then, as I'm watching the cab drive away, someone hugs me around my waist from behind. I turn around and it's her, in running clothes. She was wearing heels and a leather jacket before, and I went completely pale. She said hi in her usual happy-go-lucky tone, then noticed my look and said, "What's wrong?" I spun around. No taxi. It had literally driven away 5 seconds earlier. No way it could have turned in that time, and all the lights were red. I didn't say anything to her, just ran upstairs. Her bag was gone, things were still broken, my door still wide open. So then I told her. We were both monumentally confused. There's no way I could have mixed her up with someone else, and she's an only child. We had security check the cameras, and sure enough, me following a girl to my apartment. The angles weren't great and the film wasn't great quality, but it was pretty easy to see me and my face. But hers was always hard to make out. Looked a hell of a lot like her, but never a clear shot. No way it was the same girl. Still creeps me the F out, and we don't talk about it. Edit. Someone in the comments made me realise I should add to the follow-up of this. We did file a police report. They came, gathered up all the broken stuff, and found only my fingerprints and my girlfriend's on them. Same with my door. And this girl got into my building herself, which means she knew my door code. Her typing it in is in the footage. I just hope I never see her again. Edit 2, brought up in a conversation with user/ZapActionsDowner. I had a conversation with a professor at Columbia, family friend, about this situation hypothetically, not wanting to sound the fool. He teaches something like philosophy and other things to do with superstition and explaining the unexplainable. One of his explanations was very close to this. Somehow, a mirror of our world, running a nearly identical timeline, folded over ours or collided with ours temporarily. Maybe she saw me at the bar the night before with another girl, my girlfriend, not seeing her face, and decided to break up with me the next morning, coming to my apartment. Then the amount of a disturbance that resulted caused our two worlds to break apart right as she drove away. I'm not really one to believe in those things, but after this, I don't consider anything impossible. Also, that makes me wonder, if that's true, how much did that mess up this mirror world? Things can't possibly be the same there now. She broke up with me. I don't know. It's a lot to think on. Edit 3. Thanks everyone for the theories and suggestions. This is the first time my girlfriend and I have gone into thinking about this in a while, and this is the first time we've been able to think about it without being really shaken and scared. It's sort of fun actually. Keep it coming. I'm trying to make sure I get back to everyone, unless you post something that's already been said, so be sure to read. It's been awesome so far. If I fall asleep, I'll get back to you in the morning. Thanks again. So, what do you guys think about this one? I have to say, this kinda gives me the heebie-jeebies. The fact that the stuff was still smashed and her bag was still gone, I mean, that proves he wasn't dreaming the first encounter with the girl. So if this story's true, then I don't know if it could possibly be explained by any kind of, seizure or brain tumour or anything like that, like a lot of these stories sometimes can be. And I guess that leaves only the paranormal, or some insane quantum sciencey stuff. What are your theories? Though don't just put that the guy made it up, that's no fun. This is a story from r/glitch in the matrix from user Signal Failure, and it's an old story from 11 years ago, but it's definitely an interesting one. The title is Real-life non-playable character fails to load. And OP begins. I've been reading these after finding this thread on BuzzFeed and finally decided to post my own. It's long, so apologies. I met a girl at uni, and after uni we decided we'd move in with each other. The plan was whoever got a job first would pay the rent, etc., while the other looked for a job in the same city. I got the job, and we moved into a small house together. Months later, she's still having no luck finding a job. I feel like crap one day, which is unusual for me, and come home from work extremely early, before lunch, in through the front door, and look into the lounge, and I see her just sitting there. The TV isn't on, or the radio, and she's just staring straight ahead, not even moving. I stood there and watched her for a while out of curiosity. I'm sure everyone wonders what their partners or friends do when they think no one is around. But she did nothing, just stared dead ahead. The closest I can describe it is like in older computer games, when you get into a room and an NPC hadn't noticed you yet, and would still be stood there, waiting for you to get in and activate them. We'd had a fight the night before, so I just shook my head and went off to bed. At around 4, I get up and go downstairs again, and she's still there, staring dead ahead. At which point I obviously worry and try to get her attention. Nothing I did, even shaking her or shouting, would wake her up from whatever it was, so I call my dad. He's a dentist, but he knows a lot about medicine generally, and ask him what I should do. He says he'll be round in 20 minutes, and to keep an eye on her until then. Around 4:30, she suddenly gets up, goes into the kitchen and starts doing chores, washing up and getting tea, etc. I follow her and watch her before asking her if she's okay, and she says she's fine, pretty casually, like nothing had happened. I asked her what she'd been up to that day, and she launched into this long explanation of how she'd gone out job hunting and where she'd gone and managers she'd spoken to that day. It was creepy. I told her what had actually happened, and she looked at me oddly, like I was the crazy one, insisted that she'd been out job hunting and that she'd only just got back. I told her I wasn't judging her and it was fine that she hadn't been out job hunting, but I was worried, and she'd definitely been sat there all day. My dad came round and suggested she may have been having an absence seizure, which is a type of epilepsy. She had scans, etc., and nothing showed up. No tumours either. And since she didn't believe my story, things got pretty tense between us, especially because after possibly having an absence seizure, she'd been banned from driving for a year. Over the next 6-ish months before we broke up, I did some pretty odd things to try and prove what had happened, including booking days off work without telling her, and then pretending to go to work, only to park around the corner, come home sneakily, and then observe her. A lot of the time I'd find her stood there, doing nothing again, but when I asked her about it, she'd have all these long explanations of what she'd done that day. It happened so often that I kind of got the feeling that my girlfriend was only really on when people were around, and when she thought no one was around, she'd just go into a default off state until people got back. Weirdly, some of her stories were backed up. Like, she said she'd gone to meet a friend that day, and later when I checked with the friend, she said that it was true. This is the only part I can't really explain to myself, and I've kind of just dismissed it as the friend being nice and trying to back up her friend. We broke up, though we're still friends, and I haven't mentioned it to her since. It still freaks me out though, and I worry about what other people are like when they think no one is around. Is this usual? TLDR, my old girlfriend was only really on when people were around. So what do you guys think about this one? I'm sure there's probably some kind of mental disorder, or like the father suspected some form of epilepsy that could explain this kind of thing. But it does sound like it was not just a one-off occasion. And I don't know, have you ever wondered about certain people that you notice that you just can't really imagine what they do when they're on their own? A friend of mine kind of called them wallpaper people. You know, the people that you see that are always around, but they do seem like NPCs. I mean, maybe if we're going to go into conspiracies and the world is all a simulation, not everybody is a sentient character. And maybe you can end up even dating one of these NPCs. I don't know, I'm just pondering it for fun. But what do you guys think? And do you have a story similar to this? Is there someone you know in your life who you think might be an NPC? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for listening. Remember to hit that subscribe button in this universe, and I hope to see you again very soon.